now by friends of the show. Definitely, I believe Jamie talks about these folks often. Marc has them on. Show Me Institute, the Show Me Institute, right here, a free market think tank, believe it or not, in the heart of St. Louis City. You guys are like, you know what it means? You know what it feels like to be a minority, don't you?
Something like that, yeah.
So Graham Renz joining us here in studio. Good to have you here, Graham. I understand you're kind of a newcomer. Are you a newcomer? Or are you just returning to St. Louis?
Originally from New York, actually.
Oh, you're a newcomer.
I did my studied school in Kansas City and came to St. Louis just a few years ago. So,
well, you are proof positive, along with one of my later guests, that New York does produce common sense conservatives, because I've got Dr. Howard Wall from the Hammond Institute on later. He's a New Yorker as well. You guys were smart enough to get out.
Yeah, I have to thank my parents for leading us out here. So.
Very good, very good. Well, welcome to the great state of Missouri, and it's good to have you. So you were working on the other side of the state, I think, for a while, in the county executive's office over there.
Mm-hmm, that's right.
And then you've recently joined the Show Me Institute. And so what do you specialize in?
Yeah, so when I worked in Kansas City, I worked for the county executive out there, especially on a big transit plan he had to build rail, bus lines, trails, all this sort of stuff. And it was all, it was all good intentions. And then I got to see how the policy sausage factory worked, more or less, and decided I wanted to come to the private side of things and take a free market perspective. So.
Hey, good for you. And what is I'm going to have you toot your own horn a little bit. What are the just so people know I just didn't grab some dude walking by on the street. What's Graham's pedigree? What's your CV? What's your credentials?
Yeah, so I earned my undergrad degree at Rockhurst. I focused on a lot of things. Then I spent 2 years, like I said, working on transportation policy for County Executive Mike Sanders. Did all sorts of stuff there. And then I earned my master's degree here at UMSL. I graduated this past May, and I've been at the Show Me Institute ever since.
So you're one of those college-educated people that the left-wing elite media is so proud of all the time, right, in their polling. So,
if they say so, yeah.
Very good, very good. So, Graham, what is? I think I want to focus you in on. We hear about the words economic development get thrown around all the time. Local level, state level, federal level, and a lot of times politicians, that's code word for how much can I shove into the bag of goodies to give away that's taxpayer money, right?
More or less, a lot of the time, yeah.
And so let's focus now. You're back here in the city of St. Louis. You're focusing here. Does the city have an issue with things like TIFs and giveaways and issues like that? I mean, how are they doing on the scale of things?
I would say it's an understatement to call it an issue or a problem. I encountered this when I was in Kansas City still. And tax incentives like tax increment financing and tax abatements, which are essentially just tax subsidies. They're given to developers to come and put up a new apartment building, build infrastructure, all sorts of stuff. They're handed out like candy. And essentially what happens here in St. Louis, we have a lot of research that came out this year that took a hard critical look at these numbers, at these programs. And the results really aren't that good. In St. Louis, in the city of St. Louis, over the past 15 years, nearly $1 billion, over $700 million in these tax subsidies has been given out.
And that's over what period of time?
2000 to 2014.
So 14 years, 2/3 of $1 billion.
Yeah, that's right.
Now, some people may say, okay, well, what if maybe we got a lot for that? Maybe we got a lot of new businesses. Maybe we did a lot of good things. Maybe we've got some good results. What say you on that?
I think it's pretty clear we haven't gotten any sort of payout. And for one, taxpayers, the ones who are really coughing up money for this. So just to get in the weeds just a little bit,
Sure.
What happens is that with these programs, money gets diverted away from schools, from libraries, from core government services to go to developers to help essentially pad their bottom line.
And this is taxpayer money, right? This isn't money that grows on trees, or this is not in a big bucket that the city has laying around somewhere. The city collects tax revenue from either they have income tax, they have the extra 1% city earnings tax, property taxes, right? And all the other taxes, sales taxes, SIDS, all those little things you and I can talk about getting the weeds on. All that revenue stream comes in, right? And then the city has to decide what to do with it. And apparently, to the tune of over $700 million, they're giving it away in these subsidies.
Yeah. So essentially, this is how it works out. Folks like you and I, ordinary taxpayers, they still pay the same tax bill, but instead of getting better funding for their schools, for their libraries, for basic infrastructure, core government services, those tax dollars go to developers to put up a building, like I said, whatever the project is. And the promise is that we're going to get jobs in the neighborhoods, the economy will be stronger, we'll rejuvenate parts of town, and when we look at the data, none of those things happen.
So if I was going to walk you, if I was going to walk you down the street to Mayor Slay's office and say, "This guy Graham Renz here, he's making a point here, and I want you to tell him why he's wrong and point to all of the data that you have that shows why Graham Renz and the Show Me Institute are wrong, that this is wasted money." What can they defend any of this?
The scary thing, one of the worst things about all this is that the data and the accounting on these programs is so abysmal that from a scientific point of view, from the researcher's point of view, there's no good data to base any sort of success on. The only figures that we have are self-reported by developers. So these are the folks getting the tax subsidies, promising the jobs, promising the redevelopment. They give out numbers. They're not audited. Nobody screens them. There's no criteria for how to come up with these numbers. And so we have just those figures. And when we look at the stats, only 20% of the jobs that they have promised in St. Louis have actually been created. And again, the worst thing is we can't even prove it right or prove it wrong.
So even the self-reporters, the foxes guarding the hen house, their number is in the 20s.
Yes.
Oh my goodness.
So in short, there's nothing anybody can really point to say, hey, look, these things are working. We're getting jobs. It's purely anecdotal, and we'll see a shiny new building, and construction workers might be busy for a couple months, but ordinary folks like you and I, we're not getting any real
long term. Is there a program that rises to the top as being one of the worst? Like, or are there just so many of them and they all kind of fall on the same scale? Or is there one or two programs that are abused more than others?
I'd really say it's TIF, or tax increment financing, and tax abatements, and essentially, again, just tax breaks. What they do is these developers or whomever, they pay taxes, they pay property taxes, and then they get them right back. And what's so bad about these is that they get doled out according to if a property is technically called blight, if it's blighted. Mm-hmm. And the legal definition of blight is so stretched and so obscure that literally every real estate parcel, so every property in Missouri could technically be blighted. So they just get doled out anywhere. Speaking
of Graham Renz from the Show Me Institute, and what's the website?
ShowMeInstitute.org.
It's .org, right. ShowMeInstitute.org. You can see this on there. Graham, final question for you. So, okay, fine. So we know the problem, and we know there's a lot of issues here. But we do have some areas in the city that are pretty rough and that need to be redeveloped, and we are losing jobs. The city's down to like 300,000 some odd people. Used to have 800,000 a couple decades ago. The schools are a mess. There's probably not a silver bullet. What should the city be doing instead of all these giveaways?
Yeah, so there are some things that the city can do to attract redevelopment, and one that's just to reform tax codes in general. If your tax codes are such that you have to hand out these incentives for anything to get done, the real problem isn't in principle with the subsidies, with the tax breaks. It's with your tax code as a whole. Mm-hmm. And one of the interesting conclusions from a lot of this research that's come out is that a better way to attract investment is to manipulate the city's earnings tax, the 1% income tax that the city raises. So that researchers at St. Louis and SLU said it's a better way to incent development to augment this tax than some other taxes. So
very, very interesting. Well, I'm sure we can find a lot of information about this subject at the website. That's right.
Again, the overall message is that we're essentially gambling tons of money away, and we've got nothing to show for it. And unfortunately, there's no reform in the works right now.
And even the folks who benefit from the programs can't really show us what we're getting for it, which is a real problem. So go to showmeinstitute.org. And I know you guys are on Twitter too, right? Mm-hmm. At Show Me.
At Show Me.
At Show Me on Twitter, showmeinstitute.org. And Graham Renz, welcome back to St. Louis. Glad you're here, and thanks for all that fine detail and great work. Keep it up.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Hey, thank you so much. That's Graham Renz, Show Me Institute, showmeinstitute.org. Tim Jones in for Marc Cox. We'll try to get back to our callers in the next break. Jim, Charlie, Steve, hang on if you're able. And we've got still a loaded show ahead. Dr. Howard Wall, Eli Yoakley, Tony Colombo, all of that and more here on the Marc Cox Show at FM News Talk 97.1.